Let me remind our audience, we're speaking with Maggie Bergin, government affairs consultant from the Art of Politics based in Holyoke, Massachusetts, up the road from us. Remember the Bridge to Nowhere with Ted Stevens? We've talked about it on the show.
You have.
I heard recently that there's now a proposal for a boat to nowhere that's there. Have you heard of that? And what other absurd projects are kind of in the loop right now?
So after the Bridge to Nowhere debacle, shenanigans, whatever you want to call it, when Obama came to office, he went to talk to the appropriators. Now imagine the appropriators, these 12, they call them the cardinals, the most powerful, some of the most powerful elected officials. He went to them and he said, you can keep your appropriations process, but we need to change how this rolls. So what they ended up negotiating was the White House got more transparency and the appropriators got to keep their process. So what does that mean? It means the following. 5 years ago, the only place that you could go see what the appropriations was in a room in the basement of one of the Senate office buildings, or maybe it was the Capitol. So you had to go into the basement and walk the corridors and go to this special room and ask for, can I have the manager's report, please? And they would hand you this document like this. And that's where all the pork was. That was 5 years ago. 2 years ago, you could pay a lot of money to subscribe to a service who would do that for you, turn them into PDFs, and send them to you.
And was that service part of the government? Or
No,
it was a for-profit company doing this?
It was a for-profit company
Gotcha.
to which I paid a lot of money to subscribe to their service. Now, because of the increased transparency in the process, all of your listeners can go and find the pork in their district by going to the House website, which is house.gov, then go to the appropriations committee, and look at all the subcommittee reports. And what they're looking for is the manager's report, and they'll see it. I have it in my, I have one of the reports in my bag, and it's all online. It's all
nighttime, regular nighttime reading for you.
Unfortunately, yes, but that's another thing that I do is people might not know where the money is. Well, if I say I'm a good lobbyist, I better know where the money is.
So what is there now is there anything that challenges the Bridge to Nowhere in terms of ridiculousness or coming from a politician that said the internet isn't a series of tubes or is a series of tubes, whatever it was, Ted Stevens himself.
Oh dear.
What do you see now that's really just
He's
bizarre?
He's happily retired. I haven't seen anything that's bizarre. In fact, I've noticed there were six appropriation bills contained within the omnibus that they passed last week. And I've had the chance to go through one of the six. It's a pretty lengthy document. And what I noticed is that the appropriations are smaller. So where last year they might have gotten $500,000, they're now getting $350,000, for example. And there's less of them in total. So, for example, one of the six is called the Transportation, Treasury, and Urban Housing and Urban Development Bill. They call it THUD. Last year, under Republican control, there was $1.4 billion in earmarks. This year, there's 1.2, and the trend appears to go across all six bills. So the Bridge to Nowhere, I don't see that happening. Again, that doesn't mean appropriations are going away. They're not.
Right.
They're becoming more transparent and more competitive.
So which
is fine with me.
There have been a lot of senatorial and congressional aides that I've talked to off the record that have said they get requests all the time from people asking for money for different things, appropriations, asking. Does that ever go anywhere? Is it open? Is it an open playing field? Anybody can just ask for money, and if the politician says it sounds good to me, they can get that money, or are there strict limits on this?
David, that's an excellent question, and I'm really glad that you asked that question because people think that might be the case. They think it's like that guy in the commercial with the question marks all over his jacket.
Free government money.
Free government money. It's not true. Let me give you an example. Let's take that THUD bill and assume that there's 100 accounts in the THUD bill. There's way more. There's thousands of accounts. Well, let's just say there's 100. Of those 100 accounts, which fund, everything from the stapler at the Social Security Administration to the Secretary of Health and Human Services paycheck. Right. There's only a handful of accounts that allow earmarks. So let's take one of those accounts. So that's the first kind of, I don't know what to call it, but that's the first elimination. The second elimination is of those accounts, each account has a specific key that gains you access. And the key is the description of what's to be funded. Let's use the parks example again. So let's say we're talking about the Department of Interior, and the Department of Interior has an account for $10 million to fund urban parks. I don't know why I'm on this parks kick, but whatever. Let's just go with it.
Maybe because it's the middle of winter here. I don't know. And there's no green. Everything's covered in snow. I don't know.
Maybe. So they have an account, $10 million. They require that anybody who gets the $10 million, who wants to apply for it, has to come from an urban area, has to have a certain level of poverty, has to have a 20% match, and let's say has to use green products.
Right.
You can't have an appropriation, an earmark from that account unless your proposal has a 20% match, uses green products, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, your project has to specifically match whatever that account parameter is.
Right. So can a politician's office be proactive in the sense that maybe someone comes to them and says, I want $250,000 for a small business, and they say, well, what we do have available right now is where do you live? Because if you're in this urban area and if you agree that you're going to use these products, meaning are they that skilled and know exactly what money is available where they could counsel a constituent in that sense, or is that not really done?
It would be the constituent services job to tell a small business what's available to them. I would expect anybody to be to do that. But it would not be the case that someone could create an account specifically for a specific request. There is one exception to that, which your listeners might find interesting. There's two kinds of appropriations. There's a hard earmark, which is cash. Then there's another kind of earmark called a soft earmark. A soft earmark is language inserted into a bill directing that agency to take a particular action. So not only can Congress direct the agency to fund a specific project in the specific amount, but they can tell the agency, oh, and by the way, I want you to look into the possibility. I want you to study putting glow sticks in the safety bags of all of our soldiers.
Right.
So that's another opportunity that sometimes members of Congress take advantage of.
And we're kind of running out of time, but my last question, members on both sides in Washington often say they don't put any pork into bills. And then there's the fact checkers who come up and they say, you know what, we looked into it. Actually, they do. And I've heard this from new politicians, older politicians, more experienced, less experienced on both sides of the aisle. Is there a way to be a high level, meaning House or Senate politician, and not have in your history anything that could be called pork? Or is that just impossible based on how the system is set up?
One of the requirements of the transparency I talked about before is that if there is a request, there has to be a name associated with the request. So from this point forward, anytime anyone makes a request, their name will be associated. I can imagine a situation where someone might ask someone else to carry some water for them, but I'm not aware of anything like that ever happening.
So if a politician insists that they haven't put in any pork into any bill and they're in the House or Senate,
why would they insist on that? I just think that's silly.
Well, you hear it all the time when people are campaigning. We heard John McCain even talking about he's not going to be the pork guy, or Barack Obama saying the same thing. I mean, we hear it all the time in campaign.
He got appropriations when he was a senator from Illinois.
Certainly. So to you, as somebody who has worked in Washington, is it believable?
It's a messed up. It's not a great system. That's my belief that the appropriations process as it exists now is not ideal because you're taking money off the top of a competitive pot. And but my belief is that as long as the system is the way it is, that it's irresponsible not to do the best for your community that you can do.
But so I guess I'm hearing in that a very long-winded no. A politician is not telling the truth if he says he has never put in any pork.
I don't know if that's the case or not. I would think that I think they would be foolish not to take advantage of the opportunity
if they could.
Yeah.
Okay, we've been speaking with Maggie Bergin, government affairs consultant from The Art of Politics. Thanks for coming down today.
Thanks for having me, David. I really appreciated it.
We'll take a break, and then we'll be back with plenty more after this.